everyone. In this EMDR-inspired resourcing activity, I will invite you to work with figures. Maybe it's one figure, maybe it's several. Maybe this figure is someone real or someone built with the beauty of your imagination. This figure could be a spiritual entity or being that you hold precious in your practice, or it could be a series of figures from a variety of traditions and stories and memories that are dear to you. So as an EMDR therapist, I have drawn great inspiration over the years from people like Andrew Leeds and Debbie Korn and the work with resource development and installation. I've also liked working with attachment figures in the tone and the spirit of Ricky Greenwald's work, and also in work inspired and put out there by Dr. Laurel Parnell. So what you're getting from me in this exercise does not represent any of these great leaders in EMDR I just referenced. Rather, it's a sharing of my interpretation of similar practices that I have learned in EMDR therapy over the years. So one of the guidelines I want to give you before engaging in this exercise, if you've not yet watched my video on tapping meditation or are not yet familiar with the concept of tapping something in or strengthening a resource, you may consider watching that video first. Because after I lead us through some parts of this guided meditation, in which I'll give you a lot of options, one of those options will be to tap in or to strengthen the existing protector figure or sacred figure or attachment figure resource that you may be working with. So please review that video first for the options of how you may choose to use the tapping in for strengthening. So this is one of those great meditations and great exercises in EMDR therapy that so many clients and patients and EMDR therapists themselves swear by. Yet it can come with some potential sticky spots, and I want to make you aware of those before we dive into the meditation itself. So the general idea inspired by EMDR therapy is any resource, anything that you have a positive or adaptive connection to, can be strengthened. And that could include people, real or imagined. It can include spiritual entities or even fictional characters who you have a special attachment to. Now, the big caution here is to really sink in and examine the figure you have selected. And I'll help you with that process first before you go ahead and strengthen the presence of that resource. Some figures in our lives that may seem like resources on the surface, when we really get in there quietly and mindfully, we may realize that there's some activation or charge there that we don't necessarily want to strengthen with the tapping. Another thing I want to advise you of too is that using real people for exercises like this can be both, for lack of a better term, a blessing and a curse. You may have figures in your life who are true attachment supports, attachment resources, protective figures, sacred figures. But sometimes if they're people who are close to you, they can be what is often called a mixed resource. They may come with elements of protection or blessing or strengthening, but there may also be some other emotionality that's connected that may not be something you want to strengthen as a resource, but may be a challenge down the road. So when you do the first round of this meditation, I'm actually going to advise you not select a real person. Rather, a fictional character, a spiritual entity, or somebody made from your imagination would actually be preferred. Then once you see how that goes in this first round through the meditation, then perhaps you will feel the ability to use your judgment about bringing in a real person as a figure. So the adjective for this meditation is completely up to you. Within EMDR therapy, I've heard clients use various terms, from protector figures to sacred figures to attachment resource figures to cheerleader figures. When I do preparation work with a lot of my clients, sometimes it's beneficial to strengthen the resource of a cheerleader figure or a series of cheerleader figures, surrounding them and supporting them as they engage in the work. So for this first round of the meditation, I will walk you through choosing a figure. And if you like, you may even consider having an empty chair next to you if that helps you make this meditation exercise a little more real, or that may feel like it doesn't fit really well. You can just imagine the presence of this figure either in the room where you're at, or maybe it's just a feeling or an experience you're sensing into more than anything that's necessarily visual or representational. So let's begin first by grounding. Maybe you consciously draw your feet to the ground below you. Notice your touch points of your body sinking into the chair, although you can also do this standing. And maybe begin by bringing your hand into a gesture or a position that helps you to ground. And of course, you can close your eyes or leave them open. So let's start by working with just a single figure. So you can choose if you want to use an adjective like protector figure, sacred figure, maybe a word like cheerleader, nurturer, works better for the intention that you're setting today. So once you've selected the direction of this first meditation, which adjective, which quality you're going to intone, I'll invite you to bring into focus a figure you might like to use to represent this quality. Remember, try to stay away from real people. Think spiritual realm, or even fictional characters, or an entity that you create using the power of your imagination. As an example, and this is purely an example, I've always had a devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary from my upbringing and tradition. So I like to use her as a figure that represents multiple of the qualities I just shared. But if that, for an example, even unsettles you as too spiritual or too religious, keep in mind I've also used fictional characters like Khaleesi from Game of Thrones, or cartoon characters that I resonate with like Rainbow Bright. So anything is fair game here. So bringing up the figure you selected, I'll invite you to sense in. And by that I mean breathe and notice. Does this figure you described have a name? What do they look like? What are they wearing? If they have a face, what do you observe on their face? Maybe notice what this figure is doing or how they're placed in relation to you in this meditation. Maybe they're literally sitting beside you. Maybe you imagine them putting their hands on your shoulders in support. Maybe you're engaging in an activity with them. Notice that. And then notice the qualities that this figure you've selected brings to you. How do they make you feel about yourself? What are you noticing in your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences when you're in their presence? Is there a certain bodily sensation that you may be noticing the deeper you engage or notice this figure of yours? Keep breathing. And I'll ask you, what are you noticing now? So in the open-endedness of that question, if what you're noticing is something you'd like to tap in or install, strengthen, I'll invite you to come into a set of that tapping. Yet to be aware that if what you're noticing is causing you some challenge, with your breath, sit with it, breathe with it. And this exercise may turn into an experience that feels more like distress tolerance. But by sitting it and breathing with it, you may notice that a more positive quality of the experience highlights itself. And whenever you notice something you'd like to strengthen, to further sense into, come into a set of that dual attention, that back and forth bilateral tapping. Taking a breath. So maybe notice if there's a challenging situation that may be coming up in your life the next few days or weeks. What would it look like, or what would it feel like if you imagined bringing this protector figure with you? For instance, I recently had the experience of having to attend a very difficult meeting. And as I did that, I imagined one of my protector figures, a historical figure who has since passed away, but from whom I've always drawn a lot of great strength and inspiration. I literally imagined her coming into the meeting with me, like as a coach, as a cheerleader, giving me strength and inspiration. So what would it look like? How would it feel if you brought this protector figure of yours into this challenging situation? Play the tape, let yourself visualize it, notice it, be aware of your response. And then if you like, you can seal that, strengthen that with a set of tapping. Pause, take a nice deep breath. So one of the challenges of doing this exercise as a guided video is I don't know what's happening on the other side of the camera or on the other side of the computer as you're watching this. You can continue to go with noticing what happens when you engage with this figure you selected, continuing to strengthen anything you want to strengthen. But there's a lot of different places you can take such an exercise. For instance, you can imagine a circle of figures supporting you, which is something I like to do in my work with addiction and clients in recovery. I often do an exercise where we literally imagine our circle of support, people who are spiritual entities, maybe fictional entities from whom we draw on great strength. I also reference that example of historical figures, those who have passed away, but from whose tales we draw great inspiration, whose witnesses we may draw great inspiration. Here's where it's your discretion if you want to get into some real individuals, like maybe you have a recovery sponsor, or your therapist is even somebody who you consider part of your support circle. So if you'd like to do this next part of the exercise, I will now invite you to see if there's several figures of support surrounding you. Like they're circling you or making a semicircle, giving you that, it's like a wingspan into life. So for instance, in my circle, just giving you from some examples, I have several spiritual figures from several religious traditions. I talked about a couple of the fictional characters I use. And I do have a lot of recovery figures and friends in my life who have really shown themselves to be solid allies of my recovery. So if you want to try this, maybe imagine who is surrounding you, who constitutes your circle of support. Maybe there's only one additional figure, maybe there are several. Maybe each figure takes on a different quality. Perhaps you have a protector figure, a sacred figure, a cheerleading figure, a nurturing figure. Notice maybe what do you most need in your life today or in your life in general. And who are some figures that you can ally to present you with those qualities? So take a moment here to see what comes into focus. And then if what you're noticing is an experience you'd like to strengthen, begin and sense into a set of tapping. What are you noticing now? If you need to pause the video to continue to go at your own pace, sensing into what you may sense, making adjustments or modifications, please do that. The final challenge I will give you here is like I did with the single figure. Think of a situation coming up in your life in the next few days, in the next week, that may present a particular challenge. When that's come into your awareness, notice it. Notice what that would feel like, what that would look like. And notice your response as you imagine your circle of support taking you into this challenge. And if what you like, what you find is something you'd like to strengthen, please go ahead and do that. Taking a breath. Please continue to engage in this exercise as you may see fit after the video ends. If you are noticing some distress in this moment, a lot of these resource exercises can come with some potential risk or trigger. I invite you to go to one of your other practices, maybe a breath strategy, maybe a grounding strategy, or maybe you choose to go to your journal or to another expressive art form and go with whatever just came up. Please take care of yourself, remember your grounding, and until the next time, I thank you for joining me.